Well, welcome everybody who joins us in Bible study. I am probably right now on paternity leave. Nevertheless, I wanted to leave you with a little something for noon on Sunday. And I thought to myself, what could we do? I don't really want to push forward, but I also think that we've done a pretty good job with the stuff that we've already done. But there's probably also a few sort of lingering things that maybe we could talk about that could be fun to go back on. So, are you ready? I've got a clever title for this. You've probably already seen that. I probably put it in the description. Let's linger a little longer on Lamech, Lilith, and Leviathan. Okay, so here we go. Um, let's go backwards. We'll do these in the order of recency and then get to the heart. I just got off the phone with Rabbi, my friend Rabbi Cohen Enriquez, and he and I chatted a little bit about Lamech. Lamech is this character who we saw in chapter 4 here who had this speech. You ready for this? Ada and Zillah, listen to me, wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. After a little research, I found out that there's lots of interesting stories in the Midrash or in the Oral Torah around these guys and what's going on here. One of the really interesting ones is that there is a story, kind of apocryphal, but also like mythological about this guy Lamech. What it says is that Lamech was out one day and he was going blind. He was getting old. And nevertheless, he wanted to go hunting, and so he took his bow and he went hunting, and he spotted something in the distance, and he let loose an arrow, and he killed Cain. Cain was still alive. This is Cain from Cain and Abel, Cain, and had been marked by a mark. Remember, it says that Cain would have a mark on him for having killed Abel, so that everyone who saw him would know not to kill him, so that they didn't get the sevenfold vengeance that the Lord promised. This mark, in a lot of Jewish thought, is that looks like a horn, and so if in the distance Lamech saw this thing and he was going blind and it had a horn and he shot an arrow at it, he accidentally killed Cain. And then in his grief, he claps or something like that, does some sort of action, and and then he accidentally kills one of his sons. So it's this calamitous scene. It's and Tubal Cain is the guy who was killed. And according to one version of it, he's saying this song to try to alleviate the fears of his wives. And according to another version, which I think is a little bit more fleshed out, what happens is that he then comes home from this and proceeds to want to get with them and to carry on like nothing happened and to have continuous sexual relationship with them. And they're like, no, absolutely not. This is weird now. Exactly. Like, you just killed our son and you killed Cain, and there's this curse. And so we're worried about this. So there's also a lot of numerology that's going around about this too, by the way. 7 is popping up, the sevenfold curse of Cain, the 77 curse of Lamech. It's been 7 generations since Cain on this Cainian genealogical line. Just keep that in mind. And then I think there's also 777 years that it adds up to too. Anyway, what happens next is that Lamech says, all right, pack it up. We're going to go see Adam. And Adam is also, incidentally, still around. And so they go visit him as a judge. He's a well-respected person whose insights they seek out. And Adam passes judgment in this scene. And what he says to the wives, to Ada and Zillah, is that ultimately it's not yours to pass judgment for God. That while I appreciate that it got weird now, your punishing Lamech by withholding sex is not appropriate. You need to let God sort this one out. And they say back to him, physician, heal thyself. Which, again, shockingly, like New Testament thing to hear. But what they mean by that is that evidently Adam, in his grief following the death of Abel, had been withholding from Eve, and so what they are saying in that they accept his judgment, and they go on to continue to be in a relationship with Lamech, but they encourage Adam, and Adam listens to them to then return to the bed of Eve, and to right their relationship. And upon doing that, Eve conceives again of Seth. And the line of Seth is enormously important. It's the line that gets us Noah. It's the line that gets us to Abraham. And ultimately, as Christians, we see in our genealogies that it's the line that births Christ. So the commentators say about Lamech and about this story that while the wives accepted the judgment of Adam, their agency in the story ends up being not just important to Adam, but actually critically important to all of human history and human salvation history. So there's a little thing on Lamech that I hope broadened it. We said some other things about him in the past too, and I still think that there's a lot more that's to be said in this about this guy, and there's something still sort of archetypal too. His son's name, who is killed here, the Tubal Cain, says that he's the inventor of weapons. There's a lot of theories that perhaps this Song of the Sword, as it's called, that Lamech says has something to do with him, kind of like in the 2001 Space Odyssey, being one of the first people to pick up a weapon and slay someone, and the usage of sword and death in this way is also part of the ethnography of what's developing on Cain's line, as people aren't just fathers or individuals; they are also stand-ins for developments in civilization, including tent making, music making, weapon making, and one of the other things that Lamech has is the invention of polygamy. He's the first person to have thought to himself that he could have two wives. And the one last then point that was fascinating for me about the polygamy of Lamech. There's a lot of stories around. So like, what do the names mean here of everyone? And Ada and Zillah, I think it's Zillah, I should look this up, is the one, the translation for her is the adorned one. So quite possibly, in addition to the developments that we're putting on men in this too, there is the notion that she was one of the first women to put makeup on, and that was significant enough to mention, has made a lot of commentators and people who wrote Midrash pause and say, wait a minute, so what's going on here with this relationship? One of these women is adorned. Perhaps there is, one of the stories says that Lamech was giving her an herb to keep her barren, and then using his relationship with her to fulfill his sexual desires while his other wife bore him children. That doesn't really work out, because it appears that both sides of the genealogy did bear children, so you can't really make anything out of that. Nevertheless, I think that there's so much here in terms of explaining patriarchalism at its core, and I think that everything that's happening on Cain's genealogical side is probably still supposed to be viewed with a little bit of ethical suspicion. So this practice of polygamy seems, when people down stories like that, it seems to be that there's something necessarily kind of corrupt about it, and that fundamentally we as Christians who say that there's a repudiation almost built into the text when Christ is asked a version of this question that reminds us of Lamech. How many times should I forgive my brother? And he says 77 times, which is a total inversion of Lamech's, being avenged 77 times. There should be an inversion of all of the new and improved evil ways that the lineage of Cain finds that then is just flipped. Okay, so that's Lamech. Let's go back just a little bit further to Lilith. So Lilith is a kind of mythological character that you probably have heard in terms of the first wife of Adam. What? I thought that Eve was Adam's first wife. Well, yes, that is correct. But through a series of misunderstandings, there became a tradition that Lilith is the first wife of Adam. The word Lilith that never appears in Genesis. We only see it like one time, I think, in the entire Bible, and it's in a passage far, far away from here that references the desolation of a group of people, and in retribution for what they have done to the Jewish people, in taking them into conquest. And the story says that their fields are going to be barren and that their trees are going to be inhabited by Liliths. What the heck's a Lilith? We don't know. It appears to be in the list of other things in that passage. It has to do with other mythological beings. The Septuagint in the Greek translated into a particular kind of Greek mythological character, and that Greek mythological character is kind of a night demon, a female night demon. Bear with me for a second. The female night demon visits young men at night in their beds and proceeds to, shall we say, steal of their essence. Essentially, this is an ancient world version of trying to explain nocturnal emissions in a mythological format. The fact that it visits young men more frequently is part of that too. So Lilith then, for whatever reason, takes on this mythological form, and people in the ancient Near East are talking about characters like that. And when it comes time to answer a theological question that never should have had to have been asked, Lilith becomes the stand-in. Okay, here's the deal. We have talked before about how there are multiple authors in Genesis. There's JEPD, and one of those authors writes one version of the creation story that's very brief when it talks about man and woman. It just says, male and female, he created them. The next one goes into far more detail and again has a little bit of a patriarchalism in it, saying that Adam was created first and that a rib was removed from him, and then flesh of his flesh, there is Eve. So because people were wondering, hey, wait a minute, didn't we already have a woman created? And they didn't know about the documentary hypothesis. They instead assumed that there was a single author. The question then became, okay, so is there a woman before Eve? If so, Lilith. Lilith then kind of inhabiting these mythological characteristics and running with it a little bit, becomes a kind of female on par with Adam. And in the Midrash, in these stories, the idea about her is that she didn't much care for that. She wanted to be on par with Adam and to have complete autonomy. And the way that the universe was structured, and especially the patriarchalism of the day, didn't appeal to her at all. And so they split. They went separate ways. And in popular imagination, then Lilith and what that comes to symbolize is kind of the danger of a liberated woman, and in the fact that a woman who is on par with men, or who has equal ontological essence, is a threat to the system. And I actually think that that's, in many ways, I preferred that version of Genesis, the first creation story, simply because it has a greater equality than trying to put Eve in a position of ontological inferiority to Adam. But this version of events that then tries to synchronize those two ends up being the most patriarchal of all of them. It's kind of a concerning thing. Anyway, it's also a reason why it's important for us to understand the nuances of authorship, because it's an answer to a question that doesn't need to be answered. Male and female, he created them, is just one version of telling this story about the entrance of humans into the world, and the other version is just another biblical version of the same set of events. Okay, enough about that. Last one, Leviathan. Okay, so going to the very first page of our Bible, you will not see the word Leviathan. Nevertheless, you will later in the Bible. You'll see it in Psalms and in a couple other places. The Leviathan appears to be a sea monster. In Job, the answer that God gives to Job about Job's sufferings is kind of a list of where were you when creation was taking shape. You know, you'll never understand why you suffer because your vantage point's too small. Where were you, for instance, when I slayed Leviathan, or even when I made maybe it's when he made Leviathan there, but later in the Psalms you will see Leviathan come up again and say that God killed Leviathan, and there's some description of what Leviathan is. Leviathan is huge and long and like I said, serpentine, covered in armor, unable to be bested by humans. Looking upon Leviathan is to despair because ultimately it is so big, so huge, so outside the realm of what humans are capable of, and yet God slays this because it's God who is the powerful, all-powerful being who's capable of doing this. Why do I say that this is important for Genesis 1? Well, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Formless, empty, void, dark waters. Scholars have supposed that what we're seeing in the beginning of Genesis actually is a kind of recapitulation of a story that the Hebrew people believed probably in a little bit of a pre-monotheistic time, and that what they did was to edit it into this format. And I think that it's a I'll get back in this in a second, but it's a big edit, and it's an important edit. What the Hebrew people probably first believed is something called the Chaos Kampf. This comes from the German words for chaos, and then Kampf, which is fight or struggle. The Chaos Kampf is a story so widespread that it is shocking in how widely spread across ancient cultures this is. The Babylonians, Sumerians, even the Greeks, people as far away as the Norse have this common story that is just too remarkably similar to be ignored. And the story goes that a god character, a storm god character in almost every situation, creates the earth, creates the world after first slaying a sea serpent. And the sea serpent is always, always, always a stand-in for chaos. And that then the breaking of this spirit, of this serpent, and the usage of its corpse, its body, becomes the land and the water and the mass and everything on which humans now reside. The emblematic parts of it that you can kind of go into psychological or sociological depth is that obviously chaos should rule, but that order subdues it, and that is what we then pin on the divine and say that the divine is an actor of bringing order. And I think something also archetypal about the serpent is involved in here. The fact that it's always a snake as a stand-in for chaos is really important. So anyway, so that's ubiquitous. It's absolutely everywhere. One of the easy explanations as to why it's everywhere that has been proposed is that this is part of what's called the Proto-Indo-European religion set. Proto-Indo-European being so far back in the archaeological history that I don't think we have really too much archaeology around it. It's even hard to grasp what it what are the cultural foundations of it. I think that probably the field of study that has best been able to define that, yes, there indeed is a people around this, has been linguistics, that has said, yeah, they're actually, if you search out and go deep enough into linguistics, you'll find linguistic roots that indicate that the peoples here and big here all had some sort of common ancestry of language. And so by extension, it's possible then that they also had an extension of religion or some sort of proto-religion, and that then these stories, along with things like the flood narrative, are all sort of spread down from that one common ancestry. Or, maybe you can be a Jungian and just say that this is so emblematically true of what it is to be human that we all have invented a similar story, because how could we not? It's an archetype. It's deep and true, and this all humans deal with it exactly the same way. I don't care which one you ascribe to. I think that both of them are interesting. But the most important thing to see here is that then this version of events is changed in Genesis 1. There is a really fundamental edit that's made to the story. And I don't want to just pass over that. What happens in the Hebrew religion, and this is part of, I think, not just that that God is creating in a different way here, but that God is creating as a sole actor. This is a departure. This is a fundamental departure from what the other peoples around them who were talking about creation in this way conceptualized. This is creation from out of unity. So God is one in this story. He's not a storm god among many. He's not in contention with some other legitimate being. And by extension, by the way, polytheism answers questions of why the universe is so varied, and why, for instance, the world just seems capricious, like that one day is a good day and the next day is a bad day. Why natural disasters fall where they do. Probably the answer has an easier time answering those things, because it does not seek to answer the unity of the Godhead question, and put them all together under one banner with unified characteristics. But the Judeo-Christian religion does, and so God in the beginning is one, and God contends against nothingness, not somethingness. Maybe that's a distinction that's fuzzy, because chaos in many ways feels like nothingness, but formless and void is the word that we use here, which is to indicate that God is being against non-being, which order against chaos certainly, but even at a deeper level. So the project of the Judeo-Christian religion then is an aberration in the line, and it's still sometimes we have to answer questions about how can this happen given the unity of God, given that all of this should be fundamentally, as we see from the first chapter of this book onward, in the life of God. And I think that that's a question I'm not going to answer right now, because you have to read the entire Bible to get that in order to see where the roots of sin, where does rebellion come from, natural evil, all those things. They're absolutely attested to and explained, but you have to enter into the text and go. You can't just read the first line and then walk away saying, I didn't get it. And ultimately, that's where I'll leave you guys too, is that we've got more and more Bible to go through here, and it's fun and it's interesting, and there are so many stories behind the stories, and these are just a few things that we maybe we stopped at briefly, maybe just as like a skipping stone as we crossed the waters ourselves. So let's do this again when I come back from paternity leave. Hope you all are having a wonderful Sunday and that worship was beautiful this morning. I will see you all in a couple weeks. Bye.